Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show, and tonight we have got Shane Laruna, and it marks the return to the alt media circle, or is it a circus as in some cases, a man who has brought us parts of the inner details of the much more hidden world than most have in the alt media realise, and has helped us also put together the control system in its real format that goes way beyond pyramid schemes as described on the internet, and a world that went way beyond the Illuminati. They were just the puppets, as we have found out. And he wrote a blog which was to help people who had been victims of the programs, and despite what many people think about the cabal, most of them were victims of lies, truth distortion, and played for fools. And in a program very few on this planet are aware of, due to the massive compartmentalisation that runs through all aspects of life and society on this planet, and sadly many others also. Personally, I believe we're on a much better path now, and the platform is being built for a better future for all species, and tonight we will get to hear Shane's perspectives on that as we delve into the past, the present, and also the future. Welcome, Shane.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
How's things with you? Glad to be back.
Just peachy. Just peachy. Of course.
It's
always nice to hear from people again and say hello to people again, that kind of thing.
Well, like myself, you've kind of undergone changes in your private life, and some of those were kind of difficult, which you have overcome and decided to dip your toe back in the alt media, or is it a full-on splash? We'll see. And I think sometimes people forget we have a private life the same as everyone else and go through the same trials and struggles of life, and in some cases more so. How has those changes in personal work and life impacted you?
Oh, a lot. It's been at least 70% of the reason why I've been quiet. I've been very busy just kind of dealing with a lot of stuff I didn't have the time to deal with before, I suppose, and just circumstances of, just quite like a relationship ending, things like that.
Yeah.
Which kind of changed the whole dynamic of your life and what you have to do day to day. So yeah, it's been a struggle at times and a lot of fun at times, and given me a lot of extra time to work on some things that I was also neglecting during some less than harmonious times near the end of all of that. So
yes, I agree. Right, we're going to delve into the past first, and 3 years and 3 months ago, from our first show, which was on Cosmic Voice, September the 15th of all dates. And a show that's still heavily talked about, and much has gone on since that show. So this section of the show will be covering aspects of the past with the present day questions and the future sections to follow. So we'll start off with some updates on what is the status of the Draco now, both in terms of here and also back at home.
Well, we had to lead out with that question, right? Obviously, what I said before about them not involving themselves here is true. The ones that decided to stick around to do their thing here decided to stick around to do their thing here, but en masse they're focusing other places. Biggest change just being, as I predicted, said would happen, and have alluded to happening.
Yeah.
The rising sun did not get his crown, so Anu now has someone else close to him kind of advising him, and not that it really has anything to do with here right now, because as I've said before, what they've done here they've done other places.
Yeah.
They do a lot of things in a lot of different places, some better than here, a lot worse than here. And so in terms of him ever correcting mistakes, if that path were to begin, and let's just say there was a list made of grievances, planet Earth would still be pretty far down that list, and would take some time, obviously, to ever see anything like that. So,
Right.
without expecting too much in terms of retribution or any type of accountability from them,
Yeah.
At least there's no more fuckery
Yeah.
from them. There's still what they left behind.
Yeah.
And there's, in a strange sense, just because right now, not to say that there's any kind of quarantine, it's just, that's a good way of looking at it, because there's nothing outside of here really interfering.
Yeah.
And for a lot of different reasons, and their departure being one of those reasons.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's been kind of suggested to me, I don't know whether it's true or not, that 60% of the Draco beings no longer wish to continue the old path or the old ways. Is that something you are aware of?
If not more than 60% for sure. It's, I never want to come across as an apologist for them in any sort of way, so I don't want to say anything that even sounds positive, because they don't necessarily deserve that here. So, but at the same time, everything's changing now.
Yes.
So
that's good stuff.
That's a positive thing. It just doesn't mean much for us right here and right
now. Next one will be, I went in sequence, will be, can we have an update on the parents? And in particular, if you do you have some details on who's known as, or was known as, the Red Queen?
Well, the Queen being an AI system, so that's kind of separate. And the parents still not doing much other than just still there for ceremonial purposes, I suppose, in some regards. Advising very, very little. There's not much to be said. And, kind of just writing it out. This process of everything that's going to happen with humans figuring out their shit is going to take a long time, right? So it's not something that they need to do something once a month to make sure that things happen. They may be sitting back for years before they really ever need to intervene in any sort of way again, for all we know.
I remember you saying on a previous show, it may have been privately, I can't remember now, that they are no longer moving the walls in the maze as such. Is that still the case?
They don't have to, right? Like, now that it's kind of all out in the open, that everything's in your hands, so to speak, and you've been fucked over, or just like you thought you were fucking everybody else over, and now you're left to deal with what you helped us do all this time. Yeah. Along with all the people you thought you were fucking over in the process. Sorry to keep using that word, but that's exactly the state that they're in now. Is that they're in this boat along with us. They realize that, and there's not a lot that they can even do to reverse what they've done. So what's the best way of coping, dealing with it, and still maintaining their type of control? Problem is now that secrecy is such a big problem, and their structures relied on secrecy. Yeah. And now that they can't keep their secrets quite as easy, it's a lot harder for them to pull off changes without someone noticing. Yeah. But on the other hand, at this point, they've also kind of embraced that, and they've also kind of embraced the fact that we've woken up to what they're doing, and in some ways they're kind of laughing in our faces and putting people in our televisions that in charge of our countries that are meant to symbolize the fact that you've been duped for a really long time, and we know that now, but there's still not much you can do about it, and we've been duped too, and there's not much we can do about that. So And then bringing, obviously, that back to the Queen, which is in charge now. So,
right. The covens, from my understanding, most of them have collapsed in a way, to some degree. Is that the way you see it?
oh, for sure. Like I said, delegation and dropping, as the parents went, the covens passed on what they needed to pass on. As they did, they didn't need to be there anymore either. So, there's a lot of people within that structure, once they're called people, once they found out that their roles weren't really their roles and they weren't really doing what they thought they were doing, they wanted out just as anybody else would, right? So
yeah, good stuff.
Turn tail and run.
Of course, the way covens rose mainly because of you, and it became a lot more prevalent with Gaia TV and the blue chicken cult, did it not? But given the lack of knowledge on the role of the covens in some ways, did you feel it helped highlight that issue?
I don't know. Never really thought about it like that. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, sorry.
That's okay. Since you did your first show, which was with Kerry Cassidy, which she only really wanted to speak about one subject, and a lot of sort of taking your lead from that about the giants. But I feel we've never really had a full detailed description of who and what they are. And my question is, are they offspring from the parents? What is their timeline status now and future? And will they be a benefit to humanity or a threat going forward? Do you want me to break that up?
Well, no, I mean, I have kind of explained all of that, and it's a kind of fail-safe that was put in place that never needed to be used and just kind of got abandoned and thought it was safe to leave abandoned until they figured out it wasn't safe to just leave it abandoned, and then they cleaned up the mess. But no, they're not related to here. They kind of came here as a refugee at various points in time, respectively, between the different races of them, species of them. But no, they're not connected to them in any sort of way other than, they weren't, despite their size and strength. I mean, it's just like you would see in any kind of old movies, get enough people together and there's ways to take them down, right? So get enough technology or have enough power in various types of ways, there's enough to take them down. So
were they a benefit? Were any of them, is there any of them left? Would they be a benefit to humanity or a threat going forward?
No, they don't have a place here. I mean, other than the fascination and maybe, answering some questions, but I don't ever see the path of this world going that way. So no, I don't think they would be.
Right.
Whether or not, I don't know whether or not there's any here. I would kind of assume so, personally. I highly doubt all of them were picked up, but who knows?
So they've been in stasis, as I understand it, for quite a long time. And some of them woke up the last time we spoke, as we know. And
then there would be other remains of them still scattered around the planet that will, could be found one day. Would be nice. Would be nice if they could be found and broadcast on some type of news before any type of government agency got there to keep it quiet, But
yeah, I think the Smithsonian has covered an awful lot up. There was, I think it was Tunisia or Morocco, a whole grave in them, something like 30 of them that were well over 10 feet tall, and then suddenly the officials moved in and it's all gone,
Well, it's been documented pretty much everywhere, and there's all kinds of different stories out there for people to check it out. There's got to be something there, right? So, but whether or not we're ever going to get that clear-cut explanation of that everyone, it almost seems like it's impossible to get that on any subject these days. Like, you know, even if it's like a political move or I've even heard people argue over whether or not a sports trade went down, and that should be pretty black or white, right? So,
it's all a ball of confusion now, which is deliberate. I think we've had a lot of disclosure in different ways, which we'll cover later. Now, there's been a lot of chatter on the internet, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, on a holographic universe. Is that what you understand? And if so, how can we escape it if that's the case?
Well, that's I guess there's two different ways I could answer that from, but I'll just go from the easiest way. Like, the nature of everything is holographic. The nature of the universe is holographic, so we wouldn't want to get rid of it. You know, like it's all a projection that's coming from something beyond our vocabulary to explain.
Yeah.
But so that's where, you know, holographic universe comes from as a baseline. It's not a bad thing. It's just that's the nature of everything. And then the next way of looking at that is everything being inside of some type of computer simulation, right? Being holographic in that sense, which is another distinct possibility. But either way, universes are created in a holographic sense.
Yeah.
So
there was a mention of a Nazi timeline dated between now and 2023, which was kind of alluded to in the series Fringe, and basically an overlay of dimensions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, it's a fun possibility, right? But I don't. If you can give me an example of a way that it would matter, then
it's like an overlay. We've covered it in our show. An overlay of two worlds, where it kind of interacts between the two worlds at different times, which would explain the Mandela effects and all kinds of other glitches, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. I think that the cause of what people feel is the Mandela effect is something different, but it would explain it. So I can't totally say no. I don't agree that is what is happening.
Yeah,
I don't see things working that way.
Right. Okay. The next couple of questions are on AI as such. How many are there?
Fun.
Which is the most prevalent and concerning, and do you know who developed it and why?
Well, the one that I call Red, or some people call the Red Queen, I guess. That's the most prevalent. That's the one that matters the most, because she controls all the rest of them, at least on this planet. All of them, more or less, if you think of her as an energy source or as like an animated consciousness that has broken up in between all of the rest of them to make them self-aware and therefore be truly artificial intelligence. Started with her. Very similar to how vampires work. Anyways, from there are lots of other ones. Different factions have their own that they think is, all powerful, but if you bring that back to Red, she'll just laugh at them. So,
right.
I think that's about as far as I can answer that question without it being more specific, I guess.
That's okay.
Unless that's a good one, good enough answer. I mean,
the next one is
who developed her was another part of that question, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that would be a higher source of AI, like another. They have their own hierarchy in terms of creation as well. Again, all linked back to an artificial source. So, maybe 2 tiers below artificial source would probably be the one that manufactured her, and then her actual agenda and everything comes from the top down. So,
do you think if humans, and well, not just humans, there's from my understanding, there's a number of other beings here. But do you think if we really found out who we are and our abilities that have kind of lain dormant, do you think an AI system is necessary with those abilities?
not at all. No. I mean, there's uses for it, but it's not necessary. No. We've never needed it. We don't really need the technology. We have magic. So we just, it's been, for many different factors, kind of put to sleep. And if we were to wake that energy up, then no, we wouldn't need it. But
yeah,
humans seem to be choosing, at least en masse, to go the opposite route, which is technology. And I've also spoke about how even within our media, some people like to say that there is no magic, it's all technology.
Yeah.
But if that were the case, then I'm not going to finish that sentence.
Yeah. Well, is it not the case that all technology is lazy man's tech as such?
Well, lazy man's magic, yes.
Yeah.
So it's like it's something that you could give to a species as a bridge to civilization, but you could also just teach them the ways. But the difference is control, right? Because you insert that technology, you have a way to they become dependent on something that comes from outside of themselves. Yeah. Right, and that would be the difference. So,
yep. Next, coming up to a few more questions on the past, and then we can go into the present and the future a bit. There's a lot of people that still struggle with the idea of clones and hybrids and robotics, as they still believe it's kind of science fiction and the future. And many can't wrap their heads around how the cabal have tech way beyond our current thinking. And in fact, it's my understanding that all technology is old. There is no new technology. Is that the case?
Absolutely. I mean, everything we have in the public anyways is about 14 years behind. And to kind of put that into perspective, think about what we had for cell phones 14 years ago.
Yeah.
The jump that we've seen within 5 years and the acceleration that's happened between that. The acceleration is also relative. So put that all together. It's much further ahead. Like I said, I saw smart glass technology.
Yes.
Cell phones, flat screens,
the holographic screens. Yeah.
Touch screens, when I was a little kid in the 80s. So
yes, it's only released to the public at certain stages, and sadly, for most technology, which I've warned of the dangers many times on the main show. It's not. It's a nice path to go down, but it's a dangerous one also, and we have to retain a balance between technology and nature, because if you overstep that balance, it leads to very bad things.
Absolutely. There's a way for the two to coexist if that's what that is best for that particular planet. But there's always a danger when you go too far on either end, to be honest. That's a lot of why magic gets suppressed, is because, dark sorcerers exist and dark magicians exist, and people do things for personal gain, regardless of their methods. And that's a lot of why suppression of magic started in the first place, was to start limiting what people knew so that they had less weapons to use against each other, really.
Yeah.
And that continued until it then became cutting people off from learning about it altogether, like Harry Potter style, where, you had to be, pure blood or whatever. And very various stages of that kind of thing happening until the, community of magic became so segregated that it was, feared whenever it was seen. And then it became, outright pursued and persecuted. So, because of all of that, the result is people turning to technology because they forgot that is all possible without it.
Yeah.
In terms of, we think of something like a technology, like an example of like a holodeck. And that's great, but as a magician, you can create that type of illusion for you and a friend to go walk around in and spend some time in if that's what you want to do. You don't need a technology to do that for you. You can do that by altering your perception of the energy fields around you. So it's
it's a
kind of
bit
interesting.
It's a bit like, do we really need tin cans to travel around in space, or can we just be space?
Yeah, and my point there too was that we're doing the same thing now with technology, like kind of limiting it and drip feeding it out in reverse until people kind of get used to it before, they're fully able to just kind of plug into their computer in the morning and work from their bed and do everything they need to do with virtual reality, and slowly they're bringing out stuff and getting us more and more accustomed to looking at screens and using screens and tapping screens and swiping our fingers on things and various types of mannerisms and habits that are very conducive to living in a virtual world and dealing with computers and interfacing with them. So that's what I wanted, interfacing with computers.
It's kind of ironic, and I suppose it's the way the control system works in many aspects. Well, we're suddenly becoming into a more reality-based phase and not mired in lies and distortion, that they would roll out a different version of reality.
Well, exactly.
Exactly.
That's why it was kind of allowed to happen now, because that other reality was ready.
Yeah.
Once it was okay, then the control system could change once the new control system was ready to roll out.
Yeah.
Once it was, she red kicked the Draco out. No, I'm kidding, and it took over everything.
Yeah. Where are we next? Clones. How prevalent are they? Are you aware of the process of making them, and how long they've been operating? And is it human tech or ET or both as such?
Well, it's genetic tech, right? It's both. It's older than anything, older than either. How long has it been going on this planet? I don't really know. Longer than I've been alive. And how prevalent is it? It's they use it for different things. Like they use it to run simulations where they want real bodies, and as I said, they use them for entertainment. They use them for necessity. Need a new body because that one's breaking down, and we can't let this person in society die yet. So while they're sleeping, let's just move them into this other one. Process of making them, I don't really understand because I don't know science that well. It just, I know kind of what it looks like in various stages, and I've never sat there for the amount of time it takes them to grow, so.
It's
couldn't document the whole process, but I've seen them like sometimes they're grown from just to be a child, and then sometimes they need to be exactly the same age as the genetic recipient or the person that they've taken the genetics from. Like, say they needed to make another exact version of me, then they would need to grow one that's exactly my age and has, been through the same thing. They'd even need to, over time, they were even able to add things like scars along the way. And various other markers to make sure that it was harder and harder to tell that it wasn't the same body.
There's a number of other doubles, and this is where people struggle. If the media says this is Hillary Clinton, then people think that's Hillary Clinton, and it doesn't have to be. If it's similar enough, people don't recognise it as such, and yet a simple Google of Hillary Clinton or a simple Google of Britney Spears, etc., suddenly you're seeing 3 or 4 or 5 different variations. Is that a sign of a double or clone, or could it be both?
I think a lot of the time it's just misreporting. Because a lot of the time that is what it turns out to be. I mean, I've seen it a lot. I've worked in a lot of security venues. So, I've seen reports that we've had so and so at a venue and we didn't. So I think it can be a little bit of multiple things. But with someone maybe more high prospect, they'd have to be a lot more careful than that. It doesn't make sense for them to risk. They're very well aware that everyone's got a camera in their pocket these days. I don't think they're that stupid. So whenever I hear those type of reports, I kind of have a hard time with it personally, just because my own personal belief of their level of intelligence and how careful they can be at covering their tracks. I don't think they would allow 2 Hillary Clintons to be filmed on the planet or videotaped or photographed on the planet on the same day at the same hour.
It was just what came up.
What I think can happen too is that someone who just looks a lot like her gets photographed, and especially with some cameras and at a distance, it can be convincing. But and there's other things, and maybe it was a necessity that day, and they got caught. So there are accidents happen.
Yeah. Is it the case, and you've said this in the past, that, of course, we've got a lot of newer members now, that clones have been going to Mars a long time, and as such they've needed very little humans to be sent there?
With going to space in general, they were experimenting more with, they would send clones. Why bother? Why send someone who needed to come back?
20 years or not,
right? Yeah. Why send someone who needed to come back when you could send someone who didn't need to come back?
Yeah.
Why? Again, it's a risk thing, right? Why risk that?
Yeah.
It's not worth it when you have a bunch of other options that don't have that risk.
Yep. I did a recent piece on a show, and of course you've heard the term synth, as in synthetic human with chips in them, and which was covered in the Extinction movie, I think it was called, so that they're programmed to follow the control system as such. And I mentioned this group being, it's been reported that it was 85% of humanity were synths, or just programmed entities. Is that something you're familiar with? And I've got another theory I'd like you to tap into as well after that.
I mean, I've heard of the concept. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's that high of a percentage. It is, I don't know, I don't like the idea. I don't even see it as true very often, of there being that many soulless things running around on this planet. There's really not. It's impossible. It's a technology that exists. It's just, it's not what it, the concept is blown up into this legend of being.
Yeah. Is there a reason then that people just are not waking up? there must be some sort of program, because the evidence now is fairly overwhelming of, I'm going to cover this later on in the show, whereby, we've had disclosure on many aspects, small d and big D, and people still just roll their eyes like they just can't comprehend it or don't want to hear it.
Well, it depends on the topic. Everyone's kind of got their limit where they stop wanting to believe, or reaching beyond. And in a lot of different ways, people are waking up every day. Like all the social justice that's going on in the world and everything. There's pros and cons to all of it, but I mean, it's a symptom of people waking up. It's a symptom of people starting to ask questions. It's a symptom of people starting to notice that there's been a lot of fuckery going on, and that there's traps along the way, and that's the con. You kind of get caught up in a specific trap. Like maybe you learn about vaccines and you get so dedicated to telling all of your friends that vaccines are harmful that you don't really ask, the bigger questions. Like, if these are harmful, then why do we get them? Why are we told that they're not? Who's making this rule? Who's paying them? What does that mean? How many of them are there? Oh my God, the Illuminati is controlling the world. That's kind of the thought process and how that goes. But some people get stopped along that thought process too, and that's okay too. Like I don't.
I think
what kind of like having different teaching methods. It's almost a good thing to have people at different levels of learning when it comes to all of these different topics, because that way they can get together and have the support systems that they need in order to ask more questions beyond even that. Yeah. Without that, they would probably get too scared. So it's not even a bad thing, and it's happening. It's going to be a slow process. Yeah. But what's going to happen is that they're going to reach a point, they're going to plateau for a while, and they're going to get comfortable there, and then something else is going to come up. Maybe they're going to find another YouTube video, just like they found out about the vaccines to begin with, that makes them start thinking more about GMO foods and dietary supplements that might not actually be doing anything, and various things like that. Heavy metals in cereals, and then that turns into, they're also dropping heavy metals from sky. Well, why would they do that? 5G technology. Oh my God. HARP. Yeah. Oh shit. It's the same process, and we have to trust in that process a little bit more. And when we're looking at whether or not we're waking up, so to speak.
I think, as regards some of them, with the HARP and the GMOs and the vaccines and all kinds of deliberately engineered by the World Health Organization, diseases, and obviously when people start investigating these things, then they find out about the UN Agenda 2021, which then becomes 2030, and when you put the two together, it all smacks of a elimination program, which they were talking about 90% at one point. So it's
potentially, but I don't even think that's needed anymore. A lot of those programs that were put in place to thin the herd, so to speak, were based on us being more aggressively against their system than we are. And, they were made a long time ago and just had to be carried out over a course of 50 years. But if we didn't really stand up to them like they thought we would over that 50 years, then they don't necessarily need to use any of those fail-safes anymore. So it seems to be, from everything I've seen, that the keeping us unhealthy is a good thing for them. Keeping us alive but hurting is a good thing for them. Killing us off in mass numbers doesn't seem to be something that they need or want right now. So I think that's why none of those plans have really done anything, other than keep us more in a control state, more in a unhealthy state, mentally and physically, and definitely spiritually. But they're not, no mass genocide has happened. They're not, they're still killing people every day through needless fighting in various countries and allowing people to starve to death and all of the other things that they allow to happen. But, if we haven't seen this, false flag event, we haven't seen any of these things happen because they just haven't had a need for it.
Or in some cases, they have been prevented, and the awakening of the people. You see what's going on in France and Holland and a few other countries, and also the less reported of the peoples in Israel and Palestine suddenly getting together, which doesn't get put on mainstream media news. It's not what they want to hear. And and certain countries that are kind of abusive to women, are relaxing certain laws, and this is because the people, in my opinion, have demanded it. Those are examples of what I was saying when I was a minute ago. That we have to look at the small victories we are achieving all over the place. And the fact that Monsanto's been banned in 27 countries, which is like 10%, just over 10%. It's a sign of encouragement, to me anyway. And
most people are not going to accept that reptilians rule the world, ruled the world. No. But if they want to stand up to their government, let's just be happy with that.
Yeah, well, once people understand that the government is so far down the scale, it's they have about as much power as we do, and then the people decide to step up. I remember I went on a show 18 months ago in Ireland. And I asked the question, the cabal stepped down at midnight, what happens next? And everyone says, party. And then what happens next? And there's silence, and that silence has to be ended going forward, where, if you don't like politicians, pick your own, we had a interesting discussion about California recently, and they said they had no option but to vote for Feinstein and Pelosi. Well, you've had 4 years to come up with somebody else. If you don't like their choices, and largely politicians are their choice, they're not our choice, then we have to do something about it. Right. That's the past covered. We're going to go into the present now, but we're going to have a music break now, and we'll be back. Let me just see how long it'll take, because I know you'd like to go for a smoke. 7 minutes. So we'll be back shortly with more from Shane, and this is Tool, a kid's cover of Tool. See you soon. Hi all, and welcome back to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams, and joining us, and I'm glad to have him back on, is Shane Naruna. And we've covered some of the past stuff, and we're going to go into some of the more present stuff now of where we are now and how we're going forward, and then we'll end with what is the future. Are you back, Shane?
Yes, sir.
So things are kind of changing, and I understand with the loops, we've mentioned this in the past, that we will not be going into another 13,000-year Mobius loop cycle. And you also mentioned about in your show with Jay, is it? I think that's the guy's name, about the Saturn Moon matrix, and we don't have to cover that again. And also the ending of the soul traps. But are you seeing sufficient changes at this juncture to suggest this time there will be no more loops or veils or traps or matrices and whatever, and we have a chance to go forward?
Yes. I've never really gone too deep into all of it my reasons for believing that. But yes, there has been this pattern of loops going on here that will not continue after this one expires. That is not speaking to anything that will happen during the time that it takes for this loop to expire. But soul trap technology is no longer an issue, has not been for a while. I have more than sufficient reason to believe that is definitely true. And yeah, that Saturn Moon Matrix thing, I mean, it's all still, like I said, it's not that it's not there anymore, it's just it's broken, and what they wanted it for is no longer an issue. And so it's kind of there, and it supports certain other AI systems on the planet, I guess you could say, and CERN as well, and what we're now seeing with 5G technology. But its original kind of plan, I suppose, is just not functioning anymore. Yeah, so that's been that way for a while, and I think that it's aided to a lot of what we covered before about how we're starting to see, people standing up a bit better and people waking up a little bit more, and communities kind of coming out of that, and support systems kind of coming out of that, and people finding friends in that, I suppose, and all of that is positive change.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, technology in some aspects has worked for us, because there's many of us dotted all around the world who were considered a bit nutty with bizarre ideas and conspiracies, and then the internet coming in has kind of connected a lot of people. So in some aspects, the internet is a control system, the web, but it's kind of pleasing that humanity was able to use that tool and also connect with like-minded people and drive it forward.
Well, a tool is a tool, right? I can use a hammer to hammer a nail, or I could use it to hurt someone, right? So a tool is a tool, and if we choose to use the tools that they're throwing out there in the most productive way possible, instead of simply pacifying ourselves with them, then there's no real harm in that. That's what balance is, right? That's where you can find a balance with the technology you use in your day-to-day life. You don't have to, oh my goodness, everything's got AI in it, I can't have this in my home. You're stronger than that, so don't put that burden on yourself, because I'm sure you've got kids to raise, and your kids are going to have to go to school with other kids who have the internet. So if you don't have it at home because you're worried about the Wi-Fi frequencies, your kid's going to hate you, and nobody wants that for you. So try to remember that intention changes a lot, and telekinetic alchemy still exists. What you're thinking about things is still making it happen. So if you're a little bit less worried and a little bit more confident and have more conviction in your ability to transmute your environment to better serve your being, then you can do that for yourself and your family. You don't have to have that daily fear. Yeah,
it's all about where your thoughts go and where you put your energy, and that's something we've been trying to get across on the THI shows. You can spend all day worrying about what the cabal's doing next, or you can spend all day working on yourself and the shadow side and enhancing your own abilities that you may not think you have. But it's contained within each and every one of you if you believe. And as I understand, manifest and abilities are probably at its optimal now than it's ever been in, certainly for many, many decades, if not hundreds of years. Is that the way you see it?
Well, the thing we have to remember is why they put this structure in place to begin with, and it was to distract us enough to not put the time and energy where it's supposed to go. And even when we wake up to them, sometimes we're still playing to their game by fighting them. And the way that we spend all our time and energy worried and in fear of them and giving them all this power over ourselves. In a way, we're making their game quicker. We're helping them win their game quicker by waking up to it and taking that kind of reaction to it. Or you can start applying all of those things and be like, okay, well, if they've done all of this to make sure that I have no time, what am I going to spend that time doing? Is it going to be worrying about them, or is it going to be going out into my community and doing something to make the world a little bit better, and helping educate friends and family around me about things, and having the courage and conviction to stand behind all of the stuff that I know so deeply within my soul is real, and being that change, as cliche as that sounds, and is, it's almost that simple, because it's energy, and you're paying your currency to them, or you're paying your currency to us.
Yeah, I get that. I've kind of stayed away from the arena known as the super soldier scene due to the kind of dark reality of that scene, particularly more so following what happened with Max Spears. And I see it from two aspects. One, the distractions due to the lies told within the community due to their lack of understanding of the program that they were in, and so they kind of don't know what's true and what's not because of the program. And two, also the dark nature of their work abilities and perhaps entity attachments. Your thoughts on that? Is it something to be avoided?
Like people should avoid super soldiers? Is that the question? I'm not sure what the question is.
Pretty much that whole scene it's kind of dark, isn't it? And there's people in there with rather dark abilities, and it's not something that people, I feel, I did warn from our perspective that they should be meddling in.
Well, probably not. I mean, you definitely have to have a guard up, because that is true. I mean, if you're dealing with people who've been trained to attack others, then they have the ability to attack you, right? So you shouldn't really be approaching those people if they're you can tell that they're still triggered. They're still telling you that they're openly triggered. You should take that, like, believe them. Don't give them that chance, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's that I really don't believe them, so I'm not really worried. I just don't pay attention.
Yeah.
The problem with, like, the overlaps, just because a lot of the programs did overlap, and like my experience of moving between 1 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6, and on isn't unique. A lot that happened to a lot of people, because they do that until they find the one that you fit in.
Yeah.
Very rare that they get you right off the hop. Sometimes it happens, but not always. And so their experiences overlap as well. And so when they're telling you their stories, you have to keep that in mind as also. They may not have the timeline correct. They may think that something was something it's not, and just and same thing with any story you ever hear, I suppose. Just take it as a whole. Don't hang anything. Don't hang everything on one detail of any of it, and try to remember that they're humans, and some of them may just be mentally ill. Some of them may have other trauma that they're now putting the face of super soldier onto because they found out about it on the internet. And some of them went through programs. So any of those scenarios, they deserve compassion and love and understanding. They don't they don't need to be they don't need to be on your pedestal, and they don't need all of your attention, and they just kind of need a place to vent their stuff. So let them do it. Take from it what you want. Discard the rest. Just try not to get too caught up in any one of their rabbit holes, because it's not healthy for you.
No, it's not. Do you see there becoming a time as more gets disclosed on it? Some of these programs will have to end because the public will get too aware of it, and once they really find out what's been going on in those programs, there will be a rebellion against it.
Well, most of them have, and that's why you're not going to see another generation of this, right? Like, it ran its course. I think where people are at as a group that they're not even really where at now is that we kind of want some closure and retribution for what has gone on more than, we're looking for details of what's going on, because what's going on is almost past tense in the sense that we're in it now, and what has gone on, unfortunately, there's just how would they ever make it up to you? Even disclosure doesn't make it up to you.
No, it doesn't.
And nothing, nothing's really going to get done because it all got disclosed either. I mean, look at what's gone on with the part that I said would get disclosed. All of these cults that would play with children, being thrown under their buses, right? Like, where's the retribution? Some people are going to jail. That's not, it's not enough almost, we're talking about. We're talking about cultural programming through damaging people's psyches. That's pretty fucked up shit. It deserves more attention than putting a few people in jail, but that's all it's getting, right? So,
it's we've kind of moved away from retribution on THI because the reality is we're all victims in this one way or the other, and you can carry on blaming the cabal, but we've also played a role in it. By being ignorant or lazy-minded, ignorance in the sense that we didn't have the knowledge, and then also ignorance when you did have the knowledge, you didn't do something with it, we'll probably cover more than that later in the future section of this show. Now, in a show, I think it was the last show we had on, we were discussing the up-and-coming infighting of the cabal, and you said at the time they were kind of trimming the fat as they become overbloated and they no longer have a need for them. Do you still think that's the case, and if so, why?
Well, it's almost done now. It's everything's all chopped up and everybody's all confused and everyone's powerless, and now it's just let things play out the way that they signed themselves up for. They're getting what they wanted, or they thought they wanted. They just don't have the control over it they thought they had, and don't have the amount of toys that they thought they would have in the end. And but at the same time, people are we're still moving in that direction. So I don't know. I don't even see them as relevant in some ways to the outcome anymore. It's which is a little sad to say, but it doesn't have to be either, because maybe if I've accepted that, and it's what makes me want to do something about it, and I kind of feel like and hopefully that feeling catches on a little bit more.
From my experience, and we've spoken to a lot of the so-called higher people, A, they didn't know what was going on or weren't aware, which is a common theme, and B, there's a sea of change. Now they've accepted that there was some sort of control system and they were part slaves as well, if not total slaves. And there's now a drive to correct things. And like you said, you're never going to get paid back. We covered a recent show about the black people thinking they should get reparation for what happened to them over the last 300 or 400 years. But, to me, it serves no purpose. If the whole truth came out in one go, you'd end up with about 1,000 class action lawsuits for everyone claiming that this, that and the other, that it could never be paid out, and even if it did, it would kind of make the monetary system a bit ridiculous, and nobody would work anyway, or well, most wouldn't. And so from that aspect, it's nice that we know, but I think we're getting to a stage now of, right, okay, we know what went on. how are we going to make the changes that we wish to see and push forward. So I think that we're in that phase now.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're in that phase in a way too. Not all of their intentions have always been bad. A lot of them believed that what they were doing was for the betterment of humans too. So,
that's...
with the people who were like that, obviously now that they have a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on, then they're still those people at the end of the day, right? So they're still going to make some changes that are better for humanity as a whole, and that's where we're kind of seeing that with a little bit more liberation and freedom, and or at least a little bit more liberation into the illusion of freedom. It's but that control system is still in place with the financial system and money and all these families and stuff like that. So in a sense, it's better for us, but it's almost like a lesser evil, if that makes sense. It's still not where I would like to see us, but it is still better. So I'm not bitter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I do see hope and improvement even beyond where we're at as well. So that's a good thing. I have to always keep in mind that there's a ceiling to that freedom, right? There's a ceiling to that better. And that ceiling is kind of unavoidable. And I guess that's why I personally choose to kind of just manage it and try to make sure that as much positive change happens between,
I think
because even that world needs to be better than what it would be if it were created today, right? So having an influence on a world to come that I may not want, but I'm also probably not going to have to live in for too long.
Yeah,
and is still worthwhile. So it's not worth just giving up because I do see that ceiling.
Yeah.
And I don't even know that ceiling is as negative as it sounds. So I don't mean I'm only over explaining myself on that just to not sound hopeless or make sure that everyone understands. I don't say that. I believe that this is going to happen anyways. It is necessarily something that I feel is a defeat in any sort of way. The fact that we're able to change anything at all at this point is actually pretty fucking remarkable.
Yeah.
And the rate at which we're managing to do it and the amount that I feel we can affect between now and VR days is quite remarkable. So I still want to keep going.
Yeah, good. In recent shows, we've been discussing light and dark magic, and from my perspective anyway, neither is particularly good, as all magic external comes kind of at a price, unlike internal magic for those who have switched on more of their abilities. What's your opinions and thoughts on that?
Well, magic can be used for a lot of different things, and magic's a very, very wide term. So it depends, certain aspects of magic, like something like a mind control, is obviously always a violation, right? By its very nature, you're using magic to violate someone else's free will. Same would be true of creating illusions for people, things like that. However, the ability to make something grow isn't really violating much. Therefore, is that bad, right?
Yeah.
I think a question that it's kind of encapsulates all of that. Is evil something that is, or evil something that somebody does?
Yeah.
If no one's free will is being broken and nothing is being harmed, is this bad, right? So again, magic is a tool, and can be used for light and it can be used for dark.
Yeah.
And even like trying to put a magician into a box of being a light magician and a dark magician, there's many shades of gray, right? So
Yeah.
Don't want to overgeneralize it too much to say that it's a good or a bad thing. It's a tool that exists. It's something that's there. It's there for a purpose. And I suppose as long as we're using it for that purpose, then it's a good thing.
Does not magic lead to possession from the spirit world?
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. There's a way of casting magic that involves invoking spirits. That's danger.
Yeah.
But no, it'd be the same thing. It'd be the same question as, does all use of technology mean that you're infected by AI?
Yeah.
I suppose not. Then.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. It's just that
a lot of the magic elements that we know and are popular in our society are the darker aspects of magic. Things like Ouija boards, and things like seances, and things like that, which do lead to chances of possession, and that's why that viewpoint makes sense in such a way. But then, if you look at something like being able to speak to a moth to deliver a message to someone, in a different country.
Yeah.
Is that harmful? Is that is that dark? Not necessarily. So it's I think whenever I hear people get kind of afraid of magic, I hear something like that it leads to possession. It's not a lot of things can lead to possession. A lot of things lead to entities. It's not fair to say that magic does or doesn't. It just that's a potential of playing with magic.
Yeah, the problem that I have is that we have a lot of people who don't have the knowledge of all the implications of it. It's like the people who go to Peru and do ayahuasca and delve into the spirit world when they've got no shield and no knowledge of what they're jumping into, and the so-called teachers with less than 12 months experience are just collecting money, and the danger is because most people are not familiar with the dangers or how it works, then it's to me anyway, is a major cause of concern. And that's why I said the external magic compared to the internal magic.
Well, it's all a matter of being aware of the fact that there's dangers on either side of that fence.
Yeah.
There's dangers of avoiding it too. So internal magic and external magic, I'm not sure what you're defining those two things as, so I'm not sure if I'm quite answering the question properly.
Well, the external magic is like you mentioned before, the Ouija boards and the witchcraft and the dancing in the spirit world stuff, and then you've got the internal magic where you can influence things from a DNA point of view, as such. People have switched on their abilities, and people forget that once you get abilities, you have to act responsibly with them in accordance to free will and personal responsibility. So that's where I was going with that aspect.
Oh, and I definitely agree with all of that. I think my only kind of difference in perspective would be that I think that other things like witchcraft and dancing in the spirit world can be great ways of learning that you have that power within yourself.
Yeah.
To even be able to, because a lot of I guess the very foundation of magic is like understanding, like having will, right, and or the imagination, and the imagination being invoked can come from your first encounter with a spirit. It can come from knowing that world is real, and for some people seeing is believing, right? So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a bad thing as long as it doesn't become what you rely on, because it's more of a form of sorcery that way, because what you're doing is you're asking for someone to go do something for you. More or less you're asking for a power outside of yourself to go do something for you, which is we all know where that leads. So,
like the genie in the bottle.
Yep. And I would argue the same with ayahuasca. The personal responsibility comes after you go to Peru and have that experience, and what you do with it, and what you take from it. You can use it to change your life for the better, and be one of those stories where you're a multimillionaire and you go down there and you take it and then you donate all your money to charities and stuff like that. Or you can think that you're now, magically healed and enlightened, and you don't have to worry about anything ever again. It's all a personal choice. And again, tools and how we use them, and experiences and what we take from them. Yeah.
Now, from my understanding, things going on between the various species, not only in this planet, from an overview basis, we've kind of seen some improvements and a better understanding between the various species has improved quite a bit. Is that down to the peace treaty that was being implemented, where they're no longer enforcing martial law? Or are you seeing perhaps a more common sense approach by all species now towards each other?
It's a really, really big universe. I don't think that's a fair statement to make at all. I don't think I could.
In relation to here, anyway.
In relation to this planet, I would say so, but I think a lot of it is just that nobody's doing anything anymore. Like, it's not. It's it's the time of man. It's not to sexualize it, just to quote a popular movie, but it's the time of humans. It's people's time to do what people want to do with things. And, if anything, it's people versus themselves, and then if they can get past that, then they could do the people versus machines. But people versus themselves is good enough for now. And none of that. It's definitely, like, in my opinion, people have heard me voice this a lot, that I don't agree with a lot of what a lot of people say in terms of all of the outside influence that they think that this planet has, in terms of all of these different groups who have all these different agendas and do all of this different shit here. I've never really agreed with any of that, and I can't, because that's not what I see. There's some that do, and it's been spotty over time, but the amount of influence we actually have from out there is a lot less than a lot of this community wants there to be. Yeah. With that said, there's even less now. So,
Good.
Either way, there's even less now.
Since the last show, of course, we've had Mr. Trump and the internet sensation, or the latest one, Q, gained some popularity. Do you see that as more theatre or some change?
Is Q the QAnon?
Yeah.
I've still not looked at it.
Yeah.
I've heard different interpretations of what it's all about, what it is. Kind of made me laugh at first. I kind of thought it might be someone from an intended audience, but then I found out in a hurry that it wasn't. And, I don't really know. It's all part of the same. It's all part of the same thing. That people are just seeing the farce of it now. That's why Trump was put there, to make sure that everyone sees the farce of it. It's you could think of it like the reaction or the closing of a magical ritual, putting Trump in there to, like, they want you to know that you've been foolish, and here's the proof. This is how foolish you've been.
Yeah.
You've been that foolish. This is impersonation of how foolish you've been since we founded this company. So since we founded this country up until now, this is a cartoon version of how foolish you've been as citizens of this country.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't mean to, insult anyone who's patriotic either. So, I know what you want to believe the country is, and love that, and I admire that. But the way that they feel about you isn't necessarily the same as they prove to you if you ever fight in their wars.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We've had a number of discussions about soldiers, or soul dyers, as I call them. As for Q, the way I see it, it could be another Langley or intelligence agency scriptwriter leading the masses astray. But either way, what it has done from my perspective is it's more the QAnons rather than the Q. It's got people doing their own research where they get greater knowledge, and so from that aspect, it's got people who are not only in the community digging deeper and finding out stuff, but it's also gained a wider popularity where people are now learning themselves. So from that aspect, even if it was an agency run operation, it's kind of failed because people are finding out for themselves, not just believing what I say or what you say or what David Wilcox says, heaven forbid, or even worse, Corey Good. They're looking for themselves, and so from that aspect, I think it's been a good thing. But yes, politicians and the games they play. You mentioned people fighting themselves largely, and that kind of leads into the next question. Have you watched the series The 100? Or any of it?
I watched this. I'm pretty sure I watched at least 2 seasons of it. I don't know how many there have been, but I have watched.
Do you see it as a fairly accurate reflection of the past and current times, like the Ark was a craft and the City of Light Pill creating memory blocks and almost zombie-like people, tribes fighting over resources and land until they all realised they had a common enemy of both the system and also themselves? You say that was a fairly accurate description of that, Joe?
Yeah, and kind of I think that's a pretty accurate description of where we're at. So
yeah. Now, whilst a lot of some things have changed, is it you've mentioned that the parents are not involved as much now, and the Draco and the Covens. One of my concerns, I'd like your opinion on it, is whilst it's more a human issue, but we still have the case, from my perspective anyway, is the human minions running the old system or programs or directives that are largely oblivious to the original program. Do you see us moving out of that program altogether? Because, whilst the Draco are not involved anymore, there are still some directives that the human minions are following, so which is not a human program as such, and more outside interference.
No, I've already said no. I've already apologized for saying no. I don't think that system's going to change at all. I just think that our ability to manage it will be a lot better now that we've woken up a bit, and I think that the outcome of what they're going to create will reflect that in a lot of good ways. And at the end of the loop, I think that we will benefit from that as well. So I think that there's still a lot of positive change to come. I think that we have come a very far way.
Yeah.
I just don't think that there's any type of way to actually stop what is going to happen from happening. That's what caused the loops, right? Like that's why it's the end of the loop, because it already happened.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to wrap the mind around, but once we do, it's kind of freeing. And I'll leave it at that until another day.
Yep. No, that's it. You said in the past that there's a possibility in the future that once certain changes have been made, that this planet may not be allowed a spaceport, and so technically denying space travel. Have your thoughts changed on that at all?
I believe that there's going to be a point in time where there's a kind of rebirth here that's going to mean that we don't need that for a long time. Right. We'll have a lot of things that we need to focus on as a fully functional species on this planet that don't require us to interact with anything outside of here. We don't need technology. We don't need their guidance. We don't need their anything. We need to figure our shit out. And once we have the facilities to figure our shit out, there will be time where it's just us figuring our shit out. And my personal belief is that we will do fine in all of that, and then eventually be reintroduced to the galactic community in a way that's a lot more positive than it was this time. So, long-term success, short-term, bit of a awkward transition. Let's put it that way. Growing pains, and that's there's consequences to not taking responsibility. And even when you try to make amends, you can't fix everything. Some damage is permanent, and some consequences just have to be suffered, for lack of a better word. And it's okay. It reflects what we go through in our personal life. Where I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this has not had a perfect utopia of a life where everything has just been absolutely perfect and birds dress them. But so everyone understands that sometimes after a good ass kicking comes a much stronger person, a much stronger, if you put that into a global perspective, a much stronger species, a much stronger human, much stronger society, community, much stronger, embracing of love.
Yeah, and that's the key, community, which we'll discuss in the final part. Now, in that recent interview, you mentioned targeted individuals, and we know it takes place. But I would like your opinion. Is it done by a specific group who can manipulate reality, time, and events for a desired outcome as such?
If you put that into plural, then yes, different groups do it for various reasons. Whatever reason they need to torment or manipulate someone's life, they can do it, right? And that varies from individual to individual. What they need to affect. Sometimes it's their finances, sometimes it's their marital status, sometimes it's their social life, sometimes it's their tenure, sometimes it all depends on what disrupts them the most, really. And then they go after that.
Oh yeah. Yes, the ability to influence things. For those individuals, it's a lot to take in. That people don't realise that kind of stuff takes place, and it's a lot more frequent than people realise. We did a piece on programme members, some of whom are dotted around the alternative community, and also on monarch girls. And you have mentioned, I remember when we were trying to help Mr. Tellez, that they've also been lied to also. Is there a reason why their message always appears heavily based in fear and also doom mongering a bit. Why would that be?
For the same reason I mentioned earlier, that it's another trap after waking up you can fall into, is that you can put all your energy back into hating them, and you can put all your energy back into fearing them, and you can put all your energy back into recreating exactly the type of distraction that you're mad at them for creating in the first place. And that's why a lot of that comes out, and why it's such a heavy focus. And also for the people who take in this type of stuff as pure entertainment, it's the most entertaining. This is the dark side, to hear all those horror stories of what they did to us, and what
the clickbait headlines. Yeah,
exactly, that kind of stuff. And it's a combination of things.
We did the show highlighting the horrors of what happens to the children of the Illuminati and the parents who go, and it was called the Svarli show. I know you're familiar with that material, but why do they feel the need to essentially, with that program, remove all those people's emotions and strip their whole essence of humanity away from them? And if you wish, will you speak of some of your experiences as a child?
Well, the reason's pretty simple. It's just to break them down, because the whole reason that they've been selected for that is because they are known to be powerful. More powerful the soul, the more they'll do to try and break them down.
But
part of that could be to either just stop them from doing something that could negatively affect them. It can also be to get them to a point where they can then use that power for their self, convince through conditioning such as Stockholm syndrome type programming. Getting the handler programming, just to do what they want, and use their abilities for themselves.
Yeah.
And the other part, no, I don't wish. I don't know why anyone would wish for me to do so. But
yeah.
A lot of it's all dependent on. A lot of it would kind of be tailored, I guess, to what you were doing. Like there was something where, the basic goal had to do with being underwater for long periods of time. So one of the typical forms of abuse through that would be you would sleep in a cage that was slightly suspended above water, and the way they would wake you up each day would be by putting that underwater for an undetermined amount of time. Things like that, and then there's other things that are a little bit more direct, that are sexual in nature, and are habitual and kind of ritualistic, right?
Yeah.
Usually involving more than one person, and a little bit. So the different forms of abuse can be suffered, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Some through the programs. It's usually, like I said, conditioning for the program. No different than a boot camp, right? Drop it, give me 30.
Yeah.
And then the more ritualistic, obviously the more spiritual end of things, the breaking spirits and stuff like that, which kind of falls under the satanic ritual abuse and stuff.
Yeah.
Then that's obviously a lot more, say, sexual in nature, or disturbing, and a lot more personally violating in that sense. Or I don't know how to describe it. So
yeah,
any better than that?
It's I chose to put it in the show for the simple reason is the reality is, I imagine if people were given a free will choice, people see the cabal as having these riches and that wealth and this assets and this power and control and all that, but they've all gone through these type of programs, and I can't imagine anyone asking in their next lifetime to go through that torture and abuse for a few assets and pieces of paper with numbers on them, you know, and so it kind of ends, from my perspective anyway, where we're all blaming the cabals this and they do nasty things, but they've also endured some of the most horrific things. I know that those particular shows I had to cancel or delay the second show because people, quite frankly, were sick to the stomach, you know, and it was a useful program, where we can all come together, because I don't think many of the cabal want to, as we call it, want to carry on with that type of lifestyle and fear and threats, and they must follow this program or they're going to torture their children, and it goes through all walks of life, and you know, I just can't get my head round the fact that they would do that to children, all for a program that offers little in any sort of value.
Any sort of true value. In terms of what most of society thinks is valuable, it offers a lot of value. But, you know, and again, it's one of those things where it's, I don't know, in a very trivial way, it's like you've got to go through a course in order to graduate to the next system or whatever, right? This course just really happens to suck really badly. I think a lot of them end up looking at it that way, especially after like generations of it, right? Because generational memory will start to pay effect into that. You know, generation after generation of abuse victim will start to think it's more and more natural to give and receive abuse. It stops being, you know, something that's taboo to, like, say, even the third generation. They're kind of just like, yep, this is what we do. Right, and that's just, you know, nature, I guess, doing its thing of preserving genetic memory, and the instinct then becomes that predator. It's sad but true nature of biology that obviously can be changed. You know, so that cycle can be broken by a conscious individual. Energetically, it can be circumvented by a powerful soul. But for, you know, most of them, and we're definitely well beyond 3 generations of it now at this point, right? Yeah. So, for most of them, it's just what you do. You know, it's like different cultures having strange customs and beliefs, right? Like, we can't really understand, you know, maybe in North America, arranged marriages sounds strange to us. Yeah. You know, just like, you know, abusing your children sounds really wrong to you, you know. And maybe to another country, just, you know, to me, abusing my wife sounds really wrong to me, but I don't have a wife. But if I had a wife, abusing her would sound really, really wrong, because it just does. But there's cultures I could live in where that was the right thing to do, right? And that's it. Is like we're dealing with it's the same thing as a culture or like a subdivision of our species, because it's been going on for so long at this point now that it's wired into who and what they are at that genetic level. And depending on the souls, and it would probably just be the same souls going right back into those same families, you know, over and over again as well, doing all the same shit over and over again in order to stay in those same positions when they got a bit older, you know. And then they can turn around and do onto others what was done onto them, and then feel okay about it. And that's really sick, but that's how it works for them.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that cycle of abuse on all levels, not just
that's where the rise in consciousness is coming in, is because you're right, that some of them are starting to go, hey, wait a second, I'm not going to do this to my kids. You know, like I'm going to do whatever I can do to make sure my kids don't go through that, you know, and instead of, hey, I'm just going to do what my daddy did to me. You know, it's it's a good thing.
Well, you know, it was horrific, that particular show, but I felt it had a purpose. To get people to see that you know, the cabal are not all evil. It's just a program that they're running, and there's a lot of people in it who don't want to participate. But the overriding thing that's holding a lot of things together now is just fear. And once people overcome that fear, which is what we're seeing in large numbers now, on all levels of society, is we can change this. We don't have to absorb this fear. We don't have to be put in these awful programs. It's depraved to me, and the idea of is, well, it's always been this way. Well, no, it doesn't have to always be this way. We can all come together, whether you're a former cabal or ex-Illuminati or a current Illuminati. Let's all make the changes,
Everyone can just start breaking their cycles, It's, like I said earlier, evil isn't necessarily something someone is, it's just something that they're doing. And it can stop, they can stop and they can learn to make amends. And we don't have,
Yeah, well,
hopefully. That's a choice. It's a choice that they make.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, there's angels and demons in all of us, is there not? It's just a matter which balance you...
Which one you let out to play.
Yeah. Last two questions before we have go into a music break. Another one of your songs that you particularly like. Things for you personally in your life have been difficult in many ways due to family and bloodline connections as such, and also, as you mentioned, your own insertion into the programs. But at this stage in your life, do you feel you have domain and control over them, or is still the shadows watching and plotting your every move and word? And are there still limits to what you can and can't say?
No, I don't think there's limits to much. There's just I just know better. Now I feel like the only limits that I really have are self-imposed, and in terms of like what goes on in my personal life, I don't know. There shouldn't be any more tomfoolery.
Right.
But I haven't pushed those boundaries for a while. And I mean, right now, my current situation kind of reflects the same old, but I don't put that on them. I think that's just an attraction thing. I think I asked for this one, but last year around this time, I think was the last time that any type of influence of like that were to happen.
Yeah.
And I actually needed it to happen at the time that it happened. So haha to them. And other than that, my understanding is that I'm kind of in the clear of that. Like I definitely don't feel that anymore. So, but it's definitely taken a long time and a lot of changes to get to where I'm personally at. That said, if certain things hadn't happened, I don't know I ever would have gotten here. So I just kind of empathize a lot with people who are trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
That was why I wrote the blog in the first place, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah. Is there any update on that? Are you seeing more people stepping out and away from those programs? And is it kind of difficult in some aspects to do that because of the background of fear or any perceived threats or whatnot?
No, because for the most part, a lot of things are just dissolving anyways. So a lot of it's been a lot more release.
Yeah.
There was like kind of a critical period where we were worried about, what the dissolving of different programs would mean for people who were still kind of in the middle of them.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like I say it about other programs that I hear about. Like it's really dangerous to just let these people back into the public, So
yes, I get that.
Especially if they remember anything.
Yeah.
So there's been a variety of different ways that they've had to deal with that factor, which usually ends up coming down to being dependent on the individual and what they're prone to doing and how they're prone to reacting to things like that, what they know, their position, what they could do with what they know. But for the most part, I mean, like, I could tell you anything, and there's not really anything I could say to hurt them.
Yeah.
Right. So
we did this kind of mirrors with what you just said. You can't just put them all back into the public, because we got reports. One of the things that I've been asking on the show is for all the American military abroad to be brought back. And some of them can defend the child trafficking and all kinds of other skullduggery that's going on at the wall or the border with the South and Mexico. And we were told similar, that they have a fear of bringing them all back because of the programming and the drug abuse and guinea pig vaccines they put on them and all kinds. So maybe I put in a proposal, because they are being listened to, as I understand, of maybe we can decommission some of the military bases around both America and Canada, and create hospitals as such, or care centres was a better term, for these people to get better and be integrated. And it should come out of the military budget, which is far too over-bloated and wasting money on $1,000 toilet seats and all kinds of other rubbish. Perhaps those two programs can be joined together, or the program members and also the soldiers that are returning. Did you see that as a
maybe just every facility that makes bombs can just make 5 less bombs a day for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we could use that money to like feed some people.
Yeah.
Or get some people well. Or like get some people some water, or like it's really, really sick, and it's not even funny the amount that's obviously going out into that. I mean, how many times do they need to be able to kill the world? It isn't one sufficient, and if it's not, then what the?
It's the same thing over and over again. There's only 5% of the planet that's developed. And yet they keep destroying the same 5% and rebuilding it. Why? It makes no sense, And of course, through our show and many other shows, people are now finding out that the U.S. military is not American. It's not owned by America. It's not for and by America, and it's all part of the system. But slowly but surely, those things are unwinding. I think people, as a collective now, are starting to see through the lies that Palestinians are nasty, or Israelis are nasty, or all Germans are Nazis. When they just use countries for a certain purpose and goal, and unfortunately those people get denigrated. Like the Americans, the rest of the world thinks we're all warmongers, But it's the program, isn't it?
Exactly. Divide and conquer. Very old.
Yeah. Final question before we have a music break. Disclosure, small d and large d, you still see it continuing in the sort of drip fed and discoveries going forward, or do you see it more ramping up? Well, it has ramped up.
I mean, the discoveries are coming faster, so
yeah,
that's but it's still the same thing, right? They're not comping to what I know and that they've had this stuff for a long time, and here they're bringing it up to the surface now. It's more like, hey, look what we learned to do. Look at this new toy. Isn't this cool? Aren't we brilliant? Look at this guy. He's awesome, eh? He did it. Yeah, that guy right there. He did it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like NASA, and we found water on the moon. We knew that a long time ago. Or they found water on Mars. Yeah, we knew that a long time ago.
That Tesla guy, that guy who runs Tesla, like he comes up with so many good ideas. It's almost like he's like 1,000 people underground or something.
Yeah. Yeah, with old technology being passed off as new. Right, we're going to go to a music break. So if you're going to go and have a smoke, you've got 5 minutes. Right, this is Pussifier and the Humbling River. Pussifier and the Humbling River, and together we'll cross the river. And this is going into the final portion of our show with Shane tonight, and it's all about the future. And where can we go first? Let's go with this one. Are you there, Shane?
I am.
It's my personal opinion now that we've largely completed our role in the alt media in bringing the hidden and the lies to the masses as such. Unfortunately, by and large, the masses have ignored most of it. But conspiracies in many cases now have become fact and have even been discussed by what I call the portal people, mainstream media. And perhaps we should create a new alternative media of progression of ourselves and also others, expand our creative abilities and become more solution-based in our way of thinking and away from who did what, when, where and why. Thoughts?
Well, that's been my plan going back from way before the Ruiner blog. I like to think that everything I do is kind of in that vein. At least I try to steer everything back there. I try not to give a lot of interviews that are based on, the intel, what happened, who, that kind of stuff. I prefer to talk about, that's. We have a lot of tools at hand now to better ourselves with, and by bettering ourselves, we better others. And by bettering others, we better the world, right? So the focus needs to start going to, like, what do we need in order to grow from here? And the answer is pretty simple. And it's like, we need love, we need support, we need to come together as communities, and we need to, stop fighting with each other over intel. And kind of like start, remembering that we're all people trying to deal with the same world. And there's a lot of things that we could be doing to support each other. In all the ways that matter the most. It's like, ways of the heart, like making friends and being there to, help them through their bad days, and being there to, join in on their good days and things like that. And people who are like-minded make you feel a little bit less alone in how you feel. That's it's something everybody in every type of community all over the world needs is that kind of support system. It's kind of what they destroyed by killing the family unit and and dividing up life into 9 to 5 and everything that they've done to kind of drive us apart with the divide and conquer tactics we were talking about. We need to go the opposite direction of all of those, which is to, kind of come together and love one another right now. is that a song? It's probably a song.
Yeah,
it's there's ways to work through our differences that can be done from a place of compassion. There's ways of dealing with the problems that we're all facing that can be done fairly and from a place of reason. And we can learn to master our thoughts and emotions and actions in such a way that we're everything we do is a little bit more in harmony with the nature we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that going forward that should take the focus a lot more than whether or not they put me in a cage when I was a kid. That's it's a little bit more important that me as a grown man, I like to thank nature every day, and I like to there's a tree that, if anyone follows my Instagram, they've seen multiple pictures of that looks like tree beard that I talk to on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, like these type of practices are what I took from all of that shit. So, you know, if I can lead by example a little bit, I would like it to be in that example.
Yeah.
That, you know, at this point in time, like I'm not holding a pity party about it. I don't cry about it daily. I don't really put a lot of thought into what they did to me.
Yeah.
I put a lot of thought into what I do to the world, which is a lot better than what they did to me.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm doing that every day, then I feel pretty good about what I've been through, to be honest.
Yeah. You know, I think that's why I said I think the alt media is, as we know it, has kind of come to an end. I think we've gone perhaps far enough with the past of who did what, when, where, and why, to be able to then recognise the programme as such, and then set a new course and a new path of how we don't replicate that. Because you know, there's always the danger. I've said this on our shows. You know, the Draco's gone, and this is not happening anymore, and that's not happening anymore. But there's no guarantee that we're not going to replicate the old system. You know, whether that's in business. You know, there's a reason why all businesses have failed, all of them at one point, because they haven't been operated in the right way. There's a reason why governments have never really worked for us, because we haven't contributed enough, and it's all about how we come together on a solution basis of, like you said, with love and compassion, and not more of the competitive, destructive, materialistic mindset as such.
Well, exactly. You know, it's we saw it happen when we created the alternative media, that we basically followed all of their same structure. And guess what? We had all the same infighting, we had all the same drama, we had all the same nonsense.
Yeah.
And we still do, because we keep following their patterns.
Yeah.
You know, it's everybody wants to know their tools, as if we can use their tools against them. But we should be looking for the tools that they didn't use.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that are, you know, and seeing what we can do with those. How many different quotes could we pull out?
Yeah.
You can't solve this. You can't solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created it. You're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna grow a different type of plant with the same seed. You know, it's we need to do something different. And I think you know, an idea that you brought it up to me, that you've had that idea, and I think it's a great idea of, you know, maybe we need to burn this down and build it back up a bit. I feel like in a way, like this whole whistleblower movement aspect of it doesn't need to be there anymore. You know, like everyone's kind of figured out their shit now.
Yeah.
And we can get rid of that, and we can get rid of the weekly intel drop of, you know, this galactic star group is doing this, and none of this. It
doesn't matter.
Ground level people.
Yeah.
You know, your problems in your backyard right now. Your problems actually inside of you right now.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to start. Start with the one that's inside of you, and then you can start working outwards. And until you've taken care of what's inside you, you're never going to do anything about what's going on out there. Because they did that. That's part of our training and programs, was to learn how to master all those things about ourselves you guys don't want to master. So guess what? Do that first. You know, start there. That's where they would have started, and then from there, you do have some type of an ability to affect other things.
Yeah.
But you gotta get in control of yourself first. And
we've kind of focused a lot of that in the shows. You know, some people like the intel, and some of it's interesting, and some of it's not. You know, but you know, we've gone over the last 18 months, more the psychological aspect. You know, people that are demanding change, but you've got to be the change. You know, and there's a lot of people who don't trust themselves. Well, how can you trust anyone else if you don't trust yourself? And are you going to live your life in fear, or are you going to live your life in love? And they're the only two real emotions when you break it all down from an overview point of view. You either live your life through fear, or you learn to live your life through love. You love doing this, and if you don't like your job, change it. Why complain about it? Be the change. If there was, do you want to comment on that, or should we go on to the next question?
You can go to the next one.
Do you feel there's, in a roundabout way, there's been like a reverse psychology, and what the cabal and the Illuminati and the factions and all the different names, in essence, has been helping humanity in a dark lesson sort of way? There's a lot of people on the internet love and light and let's get rid of all the dark, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because without the dark you don't recognise the light, and vice versa. But is that the way you see it, like a reverse psychology that they've been teaching us dark lessons that hopefully we don't replicate?
Well, obviously that's not their intention, but that's exactly what I just said too.
Yeah.
Is that I had a choice. I could have become one of them.
Yeah.
Or right now I could be sitting in a high chair, and laughing at you, because I have power over you. Or I can come and join you at the table, and we can sit by the campfire and try and do something better together. And it's not what happens to the being, it's what the being does once it happens to them. And so you can look at everything that happens as a blessing that way, and it's just a lesson for you to learn from, and where you can start to see your joy and your happiness comes from how well you learn how to deal with them over time, and how you stop making the same mistakes. And a big part of that would be let's not do what they did. Let's not.
Yeah, absolutely. You referenced something in a show, in a call to me, and I referenced it in a show recently about the breakaway civilization. Of course, there's much talk on the internet about the SSP and the Nazi breakaway group and all that. But you were seeing us as the breakaway society, really.
That's the way I look at it. I think that's where, the world's going to change, and it's going to go in a specific direction, and there's going to be those of us who don't necessarily want to go in that direction. And with every choice that we make that kind of takes us away from that path, we're breaking away from civilization. And on the other end of that, we're going to have to reform our own, which makes us the breakaway civilization.
Yeah.
So that's because that terminology came from somewhere before it kind of got hijacked and thrown into that whole confussle that is the SSP. Yeah. And that's kind of a little bit more to the point of what they're referencing, is the aspect of humanity who doesn't want to join their digital landscape, and maybe wants to stick around on ground level instead of floating in the sky.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, I get that. Well, this show, our show anyway, has spent much time in part rewriting history to show that we shouldn't all be hating and fighting, and how the cabal have used countries as part of the program. And based on our group, from what I see in THI anyway, we're seeing people from all different countries and religions and colours and genders all kind of coming together in a family-style oriented community. And it's a source of much pride to me, and also encouragement. And you see that is the way the breakaway society will go. We're all coming together with a common goal of being the change.
Oh, exactly. And if that's what you all are doing, then awesome. Thank you. It's support each other, be there for each other, do what you can to help each other, even though there's probably lots of distances between you. I'm sure there's also a lot of, people who live somewhat close to you, form that community and and make sure it's an open door. Make sure that you're also still looking outside of the community for other people who you can embrace as part of your bigger family as well. Because you don't need to put up walls.
No.
There's problems that can happen when you start doing that is like, and I'm not implying that this happens with any THI members, is like a THI member being like, well, I'm a member of this group said this, or, and then you got two groups fighting. That's a danger. That's a danger in forming groups. But at the same time, as long as everybody's treating everything as the same way that they would treat their own group, then you don't have that danger so much, right? And that's kind of the approach we should be taking, and that's what will make our recreation of society better than the one that formed all of these like hardcore patriotisms and races and racial discriminations and bigotry and prejudice and all these different things that have been disconnecting us from each other. We need to make sure that in all of our new choices moving forward, all of these new communities that we're forming, that we're not allowing any of those patterns to exist either.
It's extraordinary to me. I had a certain way I wanted the group to go. But I can only guide. People have to walk in as well. And we're seeing, if some members are in trouble, but either financially or physically or mentally, everyone's rallying round. And most of us have never met each other. And one day the two of us will meet one day, and it's almost become their family, which is sad in a way, but it's the way society's going. Like you said, it's almost going to become two worlds, where they go off in their digital web as such, and we decide that we want humanity to go on a different path. And as I say, kind of a big source of pride to me that people from all over the world have come together and are supportive of each other, which is not the case outside of in society, where it's dog eat dog and everyone must have the biggest and best car and best house and best shoes and handbag and all that materialistic nonsense. Like, that's not the real value. And I'm rather proud of our members.
Well, it's a good thing, because moving forward, we just kind of need to stop just pushing people away because we're not in alignment with them, or we don't agree with them. For a period of time after awakening, so to speak, you do kind of need to isolate yourself from certain, let's say, use the popular term of lower frequency individuals, other people who are kind of draining, people who are, not on the same path. There is a point in time to do that. There's a reason for doing that. There's a reason for seeking out people who are only like-minded and spending your time with that. There's purpose for all of that. But once you've kind of, if you've done all of that, right, you've really learned from all of that, then you are going to reach a point where you can sit at that table with a drug dealer just as easy as you could with a crystal dealer. Yeah. Like a crystal, and I mean crystals, like healing crystals, not like crystal meth. You could sit at that table with a priest just as easy as you could sit there with any other spiritual guru. It's not going to matter anymore. You're going to be in control of your energy, and you're not going to have to protect it, and that's something that I learned when I was really young, and that's why I was able to be put in the situations that I was, and that's why I was able to, a Draco wouldn't bother me, because I had that kind of control over myself. And that's an extreme example, but that's an example of what we need to learn to do when we're dealing with each other too. I had that scenario recently where I'm working in a restaurant, and I'm talking to a guy because he's got problems, and I'm trying to give him some support. And at the end of it, someone who knew him was just like, that guy's like a drug dealer, right? Like, he's pretty much just like scum. Like, he doesn't really deserve your help. I'm like, well, that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. If he's a drug dealer and he's scum, then he needs my help more than you do.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at it. And when we're moving forward and kind of, reforming community and reforming society and reforming all of these things, we have to keep these things in mind that, people are kind of the product of what they've been through a lot of the time. And a lot of them didn't understand their choice. And, a lot of them, have been very, very badly hurt and need some love and support and compassion and healing so that they can make better choices. And we should be able to provide that for them.
Yeah, that's the key, what you've just said. He came to you. And because we have discussed this on our shows, you can't wake people up anymore. It almost becomes vampiric with your energy, and a lot of our members are noticing those traits and are pulling back and working on themselves, and then they'll be in a better position when the time clicks in, because eventually more and more are going to request help as such, and they're going to be ready. So it's good stuff. Our shows I've mentioned extensively. I told you we've gone very psychological, and the issues of everyone externalising everything and not internalising it, like external being religion and money is a swap for life force energy, and seeking external gratification compared to the internal, which is where the real change is. Your thoughts?
Well, obviously both of those are true. It's what we do. It's what we're kind of conditioned to do as a society. There's a lot more advertising out there to tell us to do that than there is to tell us to do anything else. We're bombarded with it from every angle. And it's really difficult to deal with. But, that's again where responsibility and choice comes in. You learn about that. You learn how these different things influence you, and then you start to make your choices based on that. That doesn't necessarily always mean avoidance, but it can also mean, just being aware of how certain things are influencing your psyche and how that influence is going to affect your emotions. And maybe when you're getting those triggers, instead of really allowing them to, really, really pull at you, you kind of just, put up some defenses and fight back a bit. Yeah. And kind of make them go away.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of I can only speak for our group, but I think a lot of are getting tired of the adverts and tired of the TV. Many of us people have switched it off, so they're not getting bombarded with that sort of external programming, and a lot of them are focusing a lot more inward. And that's kind of way the show has evolved since we had the split from Cosmic Voice and got rid of all the nonsense that surrounded that, and also the blue chicken nonsense. And we kind of focused on personal development, dealing with your shadow sides, and also doing your inner works and letting go of the pointing fingers and let's blame everyone else culture. And do you see that as something that's obviously beneficial and something that should be promoted going forward?
Well, of course. And I mean, the less of it we're entertaining, the less that we're going to feel the need to get into that circle of drama again. I think that, personal feelings about Corey aside, I feel like, the whole dynamic that was created between him and me, and then him and the rest of alt media to follow, it was, it's a really, really big wake-up call. And I kind of joked recently that, I get called the ruiner. In a way, I kind of ruined that whole dynamic too, I kind of came in and ruined that party, which kind of woke us all up to what was actually going on here. Was a party, like quite literally a party behind the scenes, and we were devoting our money and donations to a party at Mount Shasta every year, and instead of change and ascension and all the other bullshit that they were promoting it as, right? So it's it's been a really, really good thing, I think. And as much as I hated it while it was all going on, I'm kind of, now that I came back and I kind of stuck my nose back in right as it was kind of making its little death throes here of him trying to, trademark the secret space program and all that stuff. And so walking in back at that point in time, it's like it's perfect timing for me to just be like, hi, I told you so, and thank you all for like finally, like, I'm so happy that this has finally made the head of the wolf just took its last bite, and that's pretty much just should be it, because you're all smarter now. You know that you got to see firsthand the control over the alt media that has been going on through these major outlets and whatnot. That it hasn't been as healthy and as love and light as it's all been promoted to be. And a lot of it, like I said, that we followed the same dynamic as the regular media when we created this one. Corey was just the perfect cartoon poster boy for that, just like Donald Trump is the perfect cartoon poster boy for the rest. See, it's all coming out. That's disclosure for you. Yeah. Right there.
Yeah, I remember they were kind of tough times going back. I remember the flack I got when I outed Corey and said the blue avians don't exist. But when I came onto THI, I thought I was going to spend around 6 months correcting a lot of the stuff that had been perpetrated through the alt media, and I was pleased that it was all done and dusted within the space of a month, or pretty much, and we could move on with a better understanding, rather than fake programs which is designed to tell you that they were getting full disclosure, and in reality they were giving you nothing, no disclosure, and I kind of said that we would get partial disclosure, which we've already had, although some people still don't recognise it, as they're waiting for Mr. Trump or Mr. Putin or somebody else important to announce ET disclosure or announce this and announce that, when they've already been told. It serves no purpose, and thankfully that particular program, which kind of ran right through alt media, and there's a number of probably 7 or 8 of them that were connected to that particular program, including my former the former show, Mr. Drake. And it's gone away, and people are more now in tune. Yes, there's still the political drama that people are getting over, but I'm pleased to see that a lot of our members are moving away from that political nonsense, because it's all drama and theatre and he said, she said, and coming up with solutions of how we're going to go forward. And it's pleasing, because that held us back so much. The fact there was so many people, script writers and script readers within the alt media, it's kind of unfair, really. But that's well,
because it played right into exactly what we want. Most people, and you nailed it there too. It's like most people don't necessarily. I'm sure I know Randy said it. I'm pretty sure you've said it too. Other people have said it. Like, what do you need disclosure for at this point? What you want is for aliens to land on the White House lawn. That's what you want. You want them to come down here and do something. That's what you want. Just say that that's what you want. Stop talking about this mythological disclosure and start just saying that, I'm not going to be happy until they land on the White House lawn. Just be honest with us. And then we can put this topic to bed and move on to something a little bit more constructive. Because the bottom line is that's just not going to happen. Yeah. And if it did, it's going to happen without us wanting it or asking for it or demanding it, or the government can't stop it. Nobody can stop it. If there was someone out there who really wanted to do that, even the Draco wouldn't have been able to stop it. They would have had to do something about it, but they wouldn't be able to stop it. So just, no, it's not going to happen. Nobody wants to do that. That's not what we need. It wouldn't do anything for us. It would make matters worse.
Absolutely.
And
I remember saying...
Go ahead, sorry.
I remember saying, and I know you will laugh at this. People were asking for, well, I just want to meet ETs, and I get that, it's curiosity, and it removes some elements of their own doubts, but people have had experiences and they're still asking for ET disclosure. No, you've already had it personally, but I set up everyone was talking about the Dracos and the Greys and the Mantids and all different ETs, like they were part of everyday life. And then I put out the one question: if you were walking along the road and somebody tapped you on the shoulder and turned round and there was an 8 or 9 foot talking lizard standing in front of you, what would happen? And the silence, no one passed a comment for 9.5 minutes, and they all thought, oh, I wouldn't have liked that. And that's, it's getting people to think in a different way. Everyone asks for it, but if you're faced with it, a lot of these interactions have not been too nice as humans, and yet they're asking for something that they perhaps wouldn't be best to deal with.
Let's use a homebound example of that. How often do you think about the tribes in the rainforest that we don't hear about on a regular basis and don't necessarily have a name for, but we know that they're there, and how often do we talk about them? Are they a day-to-day, like just day-to-day knowledge? Is it something you stand at the water cooler talking about with your friends all the time? No. What you're looking for is you're bored with your planet. You're looking outside of it for something new. That's where that desire is coming from. I get it, but there's enough diversity on this one. Your brother or your sister, or your sibling, if you have one, is different enough from you that there's enough to explore right there that you really don't need a reptilian to talk to.
No, I agree. Right, final question for tonight. How do you envisage, or what do you envisage for humanity going forward? Or what would you like to see?
Let's just start. It's just a bit more support, a bit more understanding of the fact that we're all in this together, and that we all. Yeah. The only way to cross the river is together. That means that we got to put a lot of differences aside. We got to let go a lot of personal desires in terms of what we want to see happen, and understand that there's other people who want other things to happen. And before we even get to what we want, what is it that we really need?
Yeah.
Right? Like let's make that essential first.
Yeah.
All that stuff like water and food and clean air and trees and grass and homes and all that stuff that we need. Let's get that out of the way first, because we're not even ready to deal with just everything that goes into having to achieve that.
Yeah.
And once we get that, then we can start looking at what do we all want, right?
Absolutely.
And then at that point in time, we also can remember that it's a really big planet.
Yep.
And there's a lot of different places to go. And
it's like I come up with a few things in on the shows, and I said, I've played that song. You get what you eat, not what you want, but what you need, and also the need, not the greed, is something that we have to address. Where should it ever we progress, where people have better opportunities through funding or whatever, they have to not replicate again, and they need to take what they need and not what they greed. That dog-eat-dog world and competition, it's not helped anyone.
Well, it'd be better not to need anything, but at the end of the day, we kind of do. There's certain things that we need as biological entities that that require
essential. Yeah, that's the key.
That are essential, right? And so those are our needs. And once those are met, then we can start thinking about, like, what we want to see society look like.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of humbling what we want to see society look like to achieve what we need in the beginning.
Yeah.
That people need to kind of prepare themselves for by taking stock of what really, really matters in the world. And, that love and support we talked about earlier is the key to everybody kind of getting to a place where they don't, they don't need that competition.
No.
Right.
And a broader perspective, we hear a lot of people in Europe and also America and Canada complaining that their life's not great, and I get that, but when you can make comparisons to the vast majority of people in India and the vast majority of people in Africa and a whole heap of other places all over the world, China included, we're living like kings compared to them, and that has to change. That doesn't mean to say we have to go down to their level. We have to bring those people, provide them with the basics in life, and there's got to be a drive from the Western world, as it's called, to facilitate that change. We have largely food on the table. We have clothes, we have roofs over our head, etc. And there's far too many, 1.2 billion who don't even have access to electricity. It's a staggering figure, and we just take that for granted. That and we have to correct that. And there's 60% who don't have 3 meals a day, or 2, or even 1. We have to fix that, and that's kind of what we're driving towards with the trust in that, and hopefully we'll get a breakthrough in that and we can get started on that. But it's not about enriching our lives, it's about providing everyone with the basic essentials in life, and what you need and not what you greed.
Well, in the meantime, we have to play within this Babylonian money magic system, which means we need to find employment and all that shitty stuff that we have to do in order to survive within this particular form of nature. And that's just the reality of the situation. And the more we fight that by trying to, pray for some easy way out isn't benefiting us either.
No.
Best thing to do is find something that you can enjoy doing that can also help provide for you, and do that. And if you can't do that, get as close to that as possible.
Yep, with a personal responsibility, which is what we all have to start exhibiting going forward. We've for far too long handed everything over to the state or government or and the alternative community. ETs are coming to save us and all that rubbish. Jesus even. The only ones that's going to save us is us ourselves. And final thoughts before we wrap this show up?
Oh man, I don't know. I've already said so much.
Yeah, well, you just say goodbye then.
Yeah. It's been fun. Yeah. Nice to see everybody again. Yeah. I had nothing but nice interactions with everybody from formerly Cosmic Voice, now THI.
Good.
So hello everybody again, and nice to see you again. And stay cool, stay frosty.
Will do.
Keep your stick on the ice, as we say in Canada.
Yeah, it's not too warm here. Of course, I'm not in. I'm not in Florida anymore. It's changed from not being in Kansas, but I'm not in Florida anymore, so I'm in winter as well. Right. Thanks for coming on, Shane. I'm sure that, judging by the comments, everyone's enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll do this again and in a continuing brighter future. that I see anyway.
Sounds good.
Right, we're going
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Shane. Right, we're going to end the show with My Name is Human. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.